Hello, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, 3 Secrets Your Traditional Service Providers Are Not Telling You. My name is David Goodstein, and I'm a webinar coordinator for the Outsourcing Institute. It's our pleasure to be the host of today's event. Before we begin today's session, I'd like to quickly tell you about the questions box you can use throughout today's session. We encourage you at any time during the presentation to submit your questions to today's speakers. To do so, please click on the questions box, type your question in the space provided, and click the submit button. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email which will have a link to the recorded webinar and presentation slides. Presentation slides and recording will also be available at outsourcing.com. So before we begin, I'd like to quickly tell you about the Outsourcing Institute for those who aren't familiar with us. The Outsourcing Institute is a professional association dedicated to providing independent best practices, tools, roadshow events, and networking opportunities for all forms of outsourcing. Located at outsourcing.com, we have 70,000 members globally. OI specializes in providing low-cost and no-cost alternatives for outsourcing buyers in need of RFP tools, vendor selection assistance, training, as well as general support and coaching. For those of you in this market, we offer an array of very targeted sponsorship and promotional opportunities. Our sister company, CMS, provides recruiting services for those seeking to hire outsourced professionals experienced at buying, selling, managing, or consulting in this arena. Our contact information is at the bottom of the screen for those who have any questions. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Tom Young.
Thanks, David. My name is Tom Young. I'm a founder and managing director of Rumjog Enterprises. I spent a good chunk of my career recently at ISG, where I was a partner in their IT practice, largely focusing on the traditional RFP type solutions. And I came to realize that with these destabilizing technologies that we're seeing more and more in the marketplace, that we had a new approach. And so I started Rumjog to try that new approach, and today I'm really looking forward to our conversation with Venki and Ray on how they're dealing with disruptive technology in their commercial agreements. Venki?
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Tom. And my name is Venki Sundaresan. I'm a senior director in Cyprus. Our trading symbol is CY in NASDAQ. My responsibilities are global IT development and network security protocols, intrusion detection, spyware, anti-spyware, or malware, whatever you want to call it these days, on that. We'll talk more as we proceed in the conference. Over to Ray.
Hi, my name is Ray Solnick. I'm the president of Apnomic Systems operation based out of North America, and we serve Cyprus Semiconductor, where we provide remote infrastructure managed services, and we complement those services with software technologies, which we'll be talking about today.
Ray, I don't know if you're hearing that. Yeah, okay, I think we got that cleared up. So, David, let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to get right into the content here. And what I want to do on this call is I want to take a few minutes and set up what's happening in the marketplace, and then open up and have a conversation with Venki and Ray around how they're seeing it manifested in practice. So, if I were to say, starting out, what is happening in the marketplace today, I would say, at a very broad sense, people should be thinking about the fact that physicality is giving way to virtuality. Now, this is not a new concept. We've seen this happen going way back into the 1980s, where we saw SDN replace private voice networks in the 1990s. We saw VPN replace private data networks. We're seeing it in the last few years with cloud computing, where we're seeing virtual constructs for compute replace physical. And now we're starting to see it happen finally for knowledge workers and labor, where we're seeing digital labor models emerge. And so we're seeing this virtualized. So Dave, let's go to the next slide. Are you guys hearing that noise on the line?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So if somebody's at an airport, somebody's at an airport, maybe you can mute out the background noise.
So this slide here we're looking at right now, we're seeing commercial market trends. And what I would say, just, again, I've been working in the outsourcing industry since about the late 90s. And what I would say is today we're seeing that the pace of change in our market is exceeding our collective pace of learning. And that's basically true. And people get that when they think about Moore's Law and the progression of technology and services. And when we look at our technology and services on a nonlinear curve versus our business practices that mostly sit on a linear curve, we have some point of alignment at the beginning of those two curves, but now we're starting to see we're at an inflection point where we see visible gaps. And those market disconnects show up in the form of pricing disconnects, innovation disconnects, and the commercial contracts don't recognize today's reality. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're seeing here. So this last shift from the physical to the virtual, it really gets to the point of how people in the supply chain, how they are relating to the business processes and the firms that they support. So today we have, for the most part, a typical construct is we have business processes supported by people who are then supported by technology. We're now seeing the polar shift of that inversion relative to the business, where we're seeing technology now run the business, and now people are supporting technology. And that shift drives a very different way in terms of the way you should procure and relate to technology, and also the way you relate to people. So let's go to the next slide. So in IT services, this is where, really where my expertise is, but this really also applies to the BPO world. We're starting to see price vectors drop precipitously. So typically, when we would do benchmarks or a mark-to-market, we would take a historical point of view, and we would look at these pricing vectors that had forward pricing in it. But we're now starting to see when these new solutions come in, the entire waterline is dropping. And 30+% is no exaggeration. In fact, I've seen as much as 50 and 60% in the extreme. But 30% is, I would say, in IT services, especially infrastructure, is table stakes. And it's driving tremendous disruptions in the marketplace. The market leader in terms of revenue is IBM, with around $40 billion a few years ago on global services, is now down to about $36 billion. They've had 8 consecutive quarters of revenue decline. And so I think we're going to start to see more manifestations along this line here. So let's go to the next slide. So what's happening is, I think in today's market, buyers are starting to take more control of their supply chain. So if I look at this chart left to right, in the old days, when I started out in the outsourcing industry, I cut my teeth on a lot of big mega deals, with TCVs or total contract values of $8 and $10 billion. Those kind of contracts are very few and far between these days. But those were the multi-tower, one neck to choke model. Then we started to see the last 10 years the fragmentation of those big deals into, larger bite-sized pieces, deals that were done by discipline or tower or geography. We're now starting to see a further fragmentation of functional outtasking, where we're starting to see outtasking players, people who sell technology and gear, now pivoting into the services model. And so now service integration is becoming a big thing. So think of it as buying a car on the left, and on the right it's buying a car in the form of spare parts. I still need to now put that together. But what's interesting is when you look at this fragmentation over time, labor arbitrage as a critical component has diminished, and we're seeing the importance of software and platforms, automation and scalability become much more important. So let's go to the next slide here. So when I think of the sourcing evolution, I'm really thinking we are now approaching a second wave. The first wave of labor arbitrage, if I were to use a baseball analogy, I would say it's probably in the 8th inning. It's probably taken near its natural conclusion on where it's going to go. Wave 2 around labor automation is just getting started. To continue that baseball analogy, probably in the 2nd inning. And the characteristics of these two waves are very different, and requires, because it's different, it requires a very different approach on the way buyers think about how they engage the market. It also requires sellers to change the way that they interact with their client base. But the cost takeouts are very different. It's much higher on the second one. The first wave really required you to have scalable labor and access to that scalable labor. Now it's largely independent of that. So think of Salesforce.com as an example of a new business under wave 2. It's able to scale without worrying about its own headcount and whether it can hire enough people to satisfy that new business. The old model is your mess for less. The new way is transformative. And going forward, continual access to low-cost labor is less important than access to the smart people who are able to support that. So remember that chart I had before about the polar shift. It's less about lots of low-cost people. It's more about the right smart people to then support that technology. And then the last one is really a cultural perspective. It really gets to a lot of the Indian heritage firms where they have a culture of revenue and profit is correlated to people, and now going forward it is not. So if you look at the revenue to employee ratios, a firm like Facebook is well into the millions of dollars of revenue per employee, where some of the firms that rely on labor arbitrage as their core business value, it's a much lower number. So let's go down to the next slide here. Get one more slide here. So today we have Venki and Ray from Appnomic in Cyprus. And we want to talk a little bit about how this relationship between the technology provider, in this case Appnomic, who has a disruptive value proposition for IT services in Cyprus, how they've worked together. And so I'd like to open up the conversation to them and say, what's your observation of these trends? Have you seen these trends in the marketplace, and how has it affected the way that you're interacting with one another? Venki, what's your thoughts?
Yes, you can go back a slide or two, Tom. Can you go to the tower one?
Yep.
Where you get split into the multiple towers. Maybe one back.
Yeah, one more, David. There you go.
Yeah, perfect. So if you look at it, what I have done in Cyprus is split the entire business and the whole gambit of IT and technology into multiple segments of expertise. And then we try to bring in a subject matter specialist who would help me do more with less. And I feel that that trend is very, very strong in the marketplace nowadays, where the businesses are going to benefit a lot out of it. And also this one model of, I'm going to stick with one vendor, I'm going to stick with all these solutions for the same person, does not need to go into our current next century of outsourcing and, I would say, value sourcing. So we look for value and source based on value, not necessarily try to do the things which is offshore. So if we just look at Cyprus, what we have done is we have not gone to, we are operating in all locations, US, Europe, Asian countries, Philippines, India, China, Korea, Japan. We don't necessarily set up outsourcing pockets of excellence in all the countries. We pick based on the value. For example, we have done with Appnomic a whole bunch of automation on, say, account management. For example, an employee termination or activation or a security model we want to monitor. It is all done on an automation platform called Ops1. And because from the marketplace what we have studied, they were a perfect fit for that kind of a specialty. On the other hand, if you ask me what did they do for my cloud services, I've outsourced it to a vendor in Canada, and we are doing those cloud services based off Canada. Then if you look at my data center, some pieces of it is outsourced to Austin Data Center and Oracle. So like which, if you keep going on like that, my Cyprus.com is outsourced out of Rackspace. That's in the Bay Area. So we are trying to look for the best of breed in each one of these small towers and functional outtasking, like what you have been seeing or hearing in this conference. That's where I think the trend is going, and I agree with the trend where it's heading towards. We are already in it. So that's what I would submit as a key aspect of this seminar.
So Venki, would you say that Cypress is you use the term value purchase, right? A lot of the culture in procurement for these kind of services really focuses on the cost of the inputs to the service versus the cost of the valuation of that. And if I use an analogy, if I ask a procurement team, I say, what's the value of this oil painting? They say, well, it's the cost of the canvas, the cost of the oil, the cost of the frame. And then they at some level, never value what's the intangible of the art of that painting. You can think of the same thing when you start to look at the components of the functional outtasking. The business impact is sometimes hard to measure and has nothing to do necessarily with the inputs. How would you comment on that?
You bring up an excellent point and a question. So how would somebody like a procurement specialist evaluate a price like this or evaluate a model like this? That's why I mentioned the word value. If you look at what had happened 10 years ago in outsourcing, it was all commoditized. So people are going by the headcount, people are going by the commodity technology, like, oh, how many Java guys you have, how many SAP guys you have, how many Oracle eBiz guys you have. I think the trend is slightly shifting towards, it's not a question of how many people you have anymore or how many people you're going to put in a project anymore or how much does it cost per hour. I think it's a cost of service. Like if you go into cloud service, for example, if you do an email exchange hosted solution, the entire service is priced based on a complete package, not based on the number of mailboxes necessarily or where it is hosted out of which particular cloud, whether it is Canada or Singapore. The same way, if you apply the Ops1 platform, that's the example I want to talk about today, on what automation that can be generated. That is based on the value the client is going to get out of it and how much I'm able to efficiently use my staff because they don't need to spend their time unnecessarily anymore on unwanted stuff where they used to do manual work and we used to take about 5 days to turn around these cases. Now I'm able to do it in less than, say, 24 hours. And my staff is able to spend more time productively. And not only that, their ability to take care of their career path is even better. So the value, if you look at it, the value for me as a corporation is very high. And also as a procurement specialist, they may not quite see it right away. So it is my responsibility to make sure that I go and explain to them the kind of value that these are generating for a corporation. And once you do that, typically the procurement groups get it.
Yeah, I found that oftentimes you see when you don't take the time to well, I'll say educate and include the procurement teams in that value conversation as you just articulated. The things devolve to understanding what the price is, and we don't conduct our personal lives that way, right? If I told you I ran an RFP, I said, Venki, you and I are going out to dinner in New York today, and I ran an RFP, and I got a price for all-you-can-eat buffet, $3.99 all-you-can-eat. You're not going to be so excited to go there, right? So you make the distinction between value paid and services rendered from an outcome, and you look at the whole package, right? You're able to do that in your personal life, and so we want to bring that level of sophistication to these new solutions because it does matter. I mean, software is not just software. I mean, it does matter the impact that it has. So you mentioned the Ops1. That's going to be unfamiliar a little bit. Either Venki or Ray, can you explain what that is, and so people understand how you're using that in your conversation?
Let me let Ray explain that first, and then I'll jump in a little bit later on what I'm doing with it. To be fair, because he owns the product. Ray?
Sure, happy to do that. Tom, can you go up a couple of more slides briefly? The one with your 3 boxes on each the left and the right. earlier.
Yeah, the polar shift one.
Yeah.
One more, David. David, keep going to the one that says polar shift. It's at the beginning of the presentation, David. You're going the wrong way. There you go. That one there. No, polar shift. Right. There you go.
Perfect. So this is a good initial point to talk about what Ops 1 is and put it in the context of what you were just talking about, Tom. So Ops 1 is an IT process automation software platform, and in general we focus on data center oriented tasks, but we'll do other tasks as well. And it's got a very nice, simple, easy user interface to design processes and then to design the interfaces to different systems. And what we do is very similar to what Tom's talking about here, where in many cases Cypress will begin by asking us to pick up a process and to run it manually or to get exposure to it, and then we'll identify processes that are good candidates for automation, and we'll design the automation in Ops 1, and then we go through the Cypress change management and review process, security, testing, QA, and we'll release into production. And part of what's so interesting to me and exciting for us about this topic is that once the automation is in place, we're doing something that we're not aware of others doing, where we bundle in what we call sustenance services, where we'll sustain the automation in a way that's oftentimes very difficult for a company to do internally or for other vendors to do. And what I mean by that is, if the company has a process change or upgrades a system, for example, that happened recently at Cypress, there was an update to a system, and the interface with the automation and the system update were not compatible. So Appnomic was able to identify the gap, update the automation to accommodate it, and essentially we didn't miss a beat on continuing the work getting done and so on and so forth. But like Tom was describing, instead of our team being out in front and then having the technology sort of like an accountant using a calculator or a service desk person using a service desk tool, we've got the software out front supported by our people. So we'll support that on an ongoing basis. There is one more slide a little bit below. Maybe we just briefly spin by that, David. There's two green boxes that help explain a little bit more specifically what Ops 1 does, and then maybe I can hand it back. One more down. There you go. Hand it back to Venki. But Ops 1 generally is designed to automate high-impact data center operations. Excuse me, as companies are moving to hybrid environments, or again, trying to get software that doesn't have an ongoing operations expense associated with it, doing some of these even high-impact data center operations, or just IT operations like setting up new employees, which is a good lead into this next box on the bottom right about automating repetitive high-volume IT operations tasks like password reset or new employee account setup and some of those types of things. Venki, would you like to add or clarify?
So I think you summed it completely. There are two things you can do in Ops 1. One is the high volume IT operations, the bottom box, which gives a lot of automation relief for manual work. The other one is on the top box, which basically is about provisioning, monitoring, application performance monitoring, tuning. So the whole 9 yards. So if you want to analyze an application on where exactly the bottlenecks are or why is it performing slow, for example, online transactions, if you want to look at where the bottlenecks are coming in, this is a good way to measure it. and benchmark it, and then you can go back and relook at the benchmark as to where the performance bottlenecks are coming in. So it's a good platform. It's suited for reasonable scale and size, and we have been on it for some time now. It's successful. So it's a good one to take a look at it.
So Venki, let me ask you, what has how would you characterize the use of the apnomic stuff in terms of, let's put it in the category of a destabilizing technology, meaning it's different. It's not incremental in terms of things. How would you describe how it's changed sort of your operations and where it's affected your point of view on where things are going to head for your operations at Cypress?
Two major impact areas. One is our PPM, which is the defect tracking that we do. So parts per million is a standard in manufacturing. We measure all our defects in parts per million. And typically, those are the IT availability hours, so 99.999 type of metrics. So we were able to bring down our PPM errors from little over 1,400 to less than 400. So you could look at the scale. So what was running over 1,400, 1,500 numbers, I've been able to bring down to about 400, 450 numbers. That's incredibly low for an IT operational asset. So that was feasible in having the Ops1 platform looking at the monitors and see what's going on there. The second piece is about the automation of the mundane tasks like accounts terminations, activations. So the cycle time, what we were doing before of about, say, 4 or 5 days, because we need to do a lot of security checks. That got speeded up as we were able to do the less than 24 hours now. So what used to be a cumbersome manual process, also a lot of errors. Now it is error-free and it works faster. I'm able to utilize my resources better for doing other things, which is productive for the company. So if you look at it net, these two are the two top ones I would pick on what I have gained from the automation platform.
Venki, I think you're a little too modest, and this is a good opportunity for me to also share one of the secrets and for buyers on the call here to hear a vendor's perspective, and I'll apologize to my other colleagues on the vendor side who are on this call. But David, can you go back up to the earlier slide that shows that sort of steep declining curve with the 30% number? So what Venki just described is entirely accurate. We reduced the PPM, parts per million error rate, from 1,400 to 400, is about 70%. And we could do that because we took a number of these tasks and automated them and could apply people to some of the more interesting problems or opportunities or ways to implement continuous improvement through human capital, applying human capital. Cypress Semiconductor also recently renewed and quite literally got exactly this step-down function that Tom, you put here. It's kind of uncanny that the number's almost exactly the same. And this is the secret or the challenge for the buyer and frankly for the vendor. So I've got account executives who, when they hear me work with clients and talk to clients about driving cost out of the business while we drive quality in and doing the types of things that Cypress is talking about here, they're struggling with how do we, Ray, you're paying me to sell and to take our story Apnomic out to the market, but you're reducing our revenues by these types of automations and approaches. And for new salespeople who haven't quite got with the rhythm yet, they struggle with it. But it's embedded in how we approach the market. And the reason is because of enabling our remote managed services with this software, in this case OPS1, we can drive cost out and actually maintain our margins to acceptable levels and deliver these kind of benefits to our clients while also continuing down that curve through continuous improvement and rolling out automation by automation. So for buyers, part of the problem is the sales teams don't get much motivation or structured compensation to deal with this problem. And so instead of having salespeople or account managers and even operations folks driving this forward, there's internal behavior challenges at the vendor. At companies like Appnomic, where we're mid-sized, we're growing, the value to our company of delivering almost unbelievable results, and then having a client and a friend now and partner like Cypress Semiconductor telling the story and helping us get our story out there and hopefully meet some new prospects is very exciting for us and with us. And we have a number of clients who, once we make some progress like this in one of those towers, Tom, if they're not as far along as breaking down those towers, we're getting introduced into other business units or enterprises or functional areas. So we're very motivated to drive this and to capture market share and to deliver it, but it sure is tough for some of the larger vendors who will be cannibalizing their own revenues but don't have as easy a way to augment those revenues or grow them given where they're at in their cycle of evolution.
So Ray and Venki, let me ask you this. I mean, given the success in the areas that you worked on here, give us a sense of where you see the market going here, and tell us a little bit about what you think is next.
Well, I wouldn't mind sharing at least one or two thoughts, and then Venki, I'm happy to pass it to you. I was just at the Gartner Infrastructure and Operations Management Annual Conference in Orlando, Florida, and I met with Ronnie Colville, who's the lead automation software analyst there. And one of the things we talked about was this idea of automation sustenance services. Interestingly, it turns out that classic automation actually has a ROI that declines over time. And the reason is because when you have an automation in place and it's difficult to do updates, when you have system interfaces that change, it limits your ability to update and upgrade your other software systems that touch the automation. Or if you have workflow process improvement that you'd like to implement, a lot of times it can be limited by the automation software or platform in place. So what we've done is, and Cypress takes advantage of this, we have something called automation sustenance, and whenever there's a system update or a process change or a process flow change, in many cases we'll recommend them, we just roll that into the OPS1 implementation, and if it's, for example, up to 5 hours of work in any given month, we just go do it. If it's a much bigger change and it requires more significant investment on our side, then we'll sit down with the client and work through it. But generally that doesn't happen. So the idea of implementing the automations and then being more proactive and conscious of maintaining that automation is something that I think the vendor community is going to have to get more comfortable with, and it won't be just about selling software. That's one trend that comes to mind.
Vicki, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with Ray. If you look at the trend where I see it going, about 10-15 years ago, if you remember, companies were charging, say, credit card companies or banks by transaction. So that was the first way of outsourcing before the labor arbitrage came into picture. And then came the commodity outsourcing for the labor, the low-cost locations and whatever. trend came in. Now we are talking about the trends of value sourcing. You're going to see in the next maybe few years on chargeable basis by service. So the automation platform will be from the vendor, and you're going to be basically paying the vendor by the service types or the volume of transactions within that service. And whichever vendor is going to give you the platform and the service turnaround that you want, you're going to pay them based on those charges. I see that coming very quickly in the next maybe year or two. And another trend which Ray just pointed out was, if you look at a few years ago, the trend was that you outsource an application, and then you will also, along with it, get some few hours of maintenance where you will do some small maintenance work on application. But the same trend has carried over into the infrastructure now. So where these kinds of automation services, when you get, if for a limited amount of time, for a short time, like if it takes only about, say, an additional 5-10 hours of automation work, we could roll it into as a service improvement each month. That trend was not there before. Now with this automation platform, that trend becomes enabled. Because earlier, if you look at it, they used to charge, most of the vendors used to charge based on the number of servers, number of switches and devices. That slowly is going to go away by the volume of work, which will be measured by how much the platform is using and doing. So those two trends I see are going to happen in the next few years.
Great. Well, let me summarize for the audience here a little bit about what the three secrets are, because we didn't really lay it out on a single slide and say here are the three secrets. So the three that I would say, just to summarize, and then we'll open it up to some questions from the audience, is one is that the prices for services are dropping rapidly due to some of the advances in the service design, and contracts that were signed even as recently as 2 years ago are probably almost certainly out of market. So that should be alarming to everybody in the system to figure out how do I then do something with that. The second issue is that the center of the storm is disruptive technologies like Appnomics that are taking labor out of the supply chain. So labor automation and autonomics and those sorts of things and software and platforms are at the center of this price down in services that's happening in IT and extending into BPO. And then the third secret really is, again, to some extent runs counter to the service provider interest is trying to sell you a lot of stuff, is that sophisticated clients like Cypress Semiconductor and others really need to start taking more control of their supply chain, right? You cannot outsource the responsibility of every aspect of the supply chain. You have to take a more active role. So those are the three secrets that we'd like to share. And then at this point, David, I'd like to open it up. We had said we were going to leave about 20 minutes for some Q&A, but I don't know if there's any questions pending, but are you able to open that up for us to do that?
Yeah, it's open now.
So if there's no questions.
Tom, this is Ray. One of the questions that often comes up as we work with clients is, well, what does this mean for my role in the IT organization, and is the sort of next wave of outsourcing going to be to these automation tools? And relative to your third secret that you mentioned, I'm really pleased to say that one, I'm not aware of anyone, any position in Cypress that was replaced through this process, and conversely, the two guys who were the lead program managers a year and a half ago were taken off of the work they were doing with Appnomic and were put on a variety of strategic project initiatives to better leverage IT across Cypress Semiconductor, and to do it in ways that really required their unique knowledge of the Cypress culture and facilities and IT environment. And then more recently, about a month ago, Venki had the pleasure of promoting another person who was the lead in this process of managing and sort of integrating Epnomic into the Cypress ecosystem. That person got promoted, and you know, early on it wasn't all you know, cheery and happy. I think people at Cypress were wondering, who are these guys at Epnomic and what are they doing with this software? And it took a little bit of time for the teams to gel, but now I think the folks at Cypress are really pleased and view Epnomic as a resource to leverage for their own careers and making a bigger impact at the company. Is that, Venki, does that, what do you think about that?
Correct. You said it right and you summed it right, so that's correct.
Okay, great.
So I just had somebody text me with a solution on my iPhone. They just sent me a note. They didn't go through the system here, but one question they ask is, how does this play into, how does big data and analytics play into the kinds of solutions that you are putting forth, Ray, and I'll ask Venki the same thing.
You know, that was going to be the second trend, Tom, when you asked, you know, where do you see things going? The other software platform that we have at Epnomic, and they both relate to each other. David, maybe you can go to the slide that shows the offerings from Epnomic. Is called Apps One, and it's a representation from a new category of software called IT Operations Analytics. I think it's the slide just before that or just after it. One more up. Yeah. And so what's happening in the IT operations management software industry, which is about a $20 billion market, is two things as it relates to analytics. One, every tool out there has got to get smarter and is getting smarter. Clients are just not as up for dealing with having to manage these complex tools as much as they're interested in those tools creating value for them, kind of like what Venki was alluding to. So the tools have to get smarter, and they have so much rich data, whether it's a service desk tool or a process automation tool or a monitoring system. So analytics is getting woven into many of these pre-existing tools. And then there's a new category of vendors like Epnomic that are introducing IT operations analytics platforms. Ops One is an example of that. Apps One is an example of that. And Apps One does pattern matching to identify behaviors in application environments. And some of the benefits of this software getting smarter and this being a trend, and the reason why you can get that step-down function that Tom was talking about earlier is because, for example, instead of helping fix things faster and accelerating the mean time to repair, which based on some studies has gone down about 75% over the last 10 years, these pattern matching and pattern discovery and analytics engines can now identify anomalies or deviations in an IT environment and help prevent an issue from happening in the first place. It's kind of like the difference between a fire extinguisher and a smoke alarm. They both kind of work on the same problem, but the smoke alarm is a completely different approach. It measures when there's little bits of smoke particulate in the air, like a piece of burning toast or smoking toast that's not really on fire yet, and it gives you an early warning alert so you can get in there and prevent a real problem from happening. Well, the Apps One software and ITOA software does that, and for the service provider like Epnomic or other IT outsourcing companies that use Epnomic software, we can now prevent issues deep in the IT environment from turning into end user or business affecting incidents. And that's why what we call, what we do, RIMS Plus. The plus is this idea of having software or technology enablement that includes the analytics and the automation like Venki was alluding to before. Did that explain I can talk more about big data analytics and the approaches and some of the science or math there, the machine learning techniques, but I'm not sure that's as relevant.
So Ray, one thing, it's the nature of the architecture of these solutions that if I have a labor-based, and again, think of the inversion of if I have a labor-based supply chain, my ability to collect telemetry from the operations has its limits, right? It's hard to ask people what they're doing every 5 minutes and have them collect a sufficient amount of data. When it's a software-based workflow, my ability to collect telemetry is tremendous, and it approaches a incremental cost of 0 to collect that data. And then what I do with it really leads to what I'll call the next level of innovation that's going to happen. So while this is a very disruptive technology, we see these 30% price downs in operations, it really is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what could be down the future when we start to get service models and service supply chain models that have predictive capabilities that move beyond the fire alarm and move to the fire extinguisher, and then ultimately move to the fire prevention.
It's actually you're making a great point, and the analogy breaks down when it comes to this fire extinguisher and smoke alarm, because it's almost like the smoke alarm then goes on and like builds additions to your home. Let me tell you what I mean. We have a banking client as an example. Maybe we'll do an event like this again with the Outsourcing Institute on that one. They are using Apps One software to prevent internet banking portal slowness or availability problems. What they found was once they had the Apps One automation engine in the environment doing that, they could use Ops One to automate making sure that end-user transactions are no more than 2 seconds, which was the threshold in that market. That was the target benchmark. And we do that by applying the analytics to understand the patterns occurring in the application, in this case, Internet Banking Portal stack. And then when certain conditions are met, Apps One sends a message to Ops One, which then makes a configuration change in the banking portal that reduces a very resource-intensive application module usage and accelerates all transactions response times enormously. And we're not quite there yet, but we're in the process of measuring what has that implementation done to maybe increase customer loyalty, reduce customer attrition, increase the number of transactions that customers are doing because things are moving along more smoothly, faster, and so on and so forth. And so that's an example of taking the analytics and the automation, blending them together, and enabling the IT environment to not only defend against problems, slowness, availability, but to go on the offense on building the business. And those are the areas that we have some of the most exciting wins, and I know that we're working with Cypress on some discussions about the next phase of our relationship with them, bringing some more of these analytics into the work that we're doing, which is a natural evolution point.
So Venki, there's people sitting out here listening to this, and they're saying, this sounds interesting. What tips would you give sort of the buyers on the call? What tips would you give them and say, how would they take the next step to explore the possibility of this kind of disruptive solution in the market or in the supply chain that they operate?
My suggestion to procurement team would be this is not a commodity sourcing activity. This is a value sourcing activity. So the moment it's a value sourcing activity, you need to look at maybe sometimes a sole sourcing, which is going to be maybe 1 or 2 vendors, could be unique vendors, you never know. Work with your technical team, do some pre-qualification of vendors, and do a trial. I mean, do a trial before you do. Just like you do an RFQ, do a trial with a small platform. That's the only logical way to explore it. And once you have a trial that you think you like, then you can ask for a bid with them, and then it's basically a good negotiation you got to have with vendors like Autonomic. Because there is no easy way to compare one solution to another, particularly an automation platform.
Ray, if people are interested in figuring out Appnomics and whether or not Appnomics can help them, what would you suggest they do?
Well, first of all, on Venki's comment on sorry, Venki, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, talk to Ray and get him to do a small pilot for you. He'll be more than willing to do it. We have been working with Appnomics for years now, so.
Yeah. So we do proofs of concept all the time. In some cases, they're paid, and in almost all of those cases, the fee for the POC gets applied as a credit towards the ultimate purchase. And that's the typical model. In some cases, there may be exceptions here or there, but we do that all the time, and it does take a little bit of a commitment or real interest to take advantage of these things, and so the POCs are good for both parties in that process. And then in terms of getting to know Appnomic a little bit better, David, maybe you can just move to the slide about the company. I can cover a few key points here, and then we can move towards wrapping up this webinar. On our website, we do have a resources area where there's lots of company collateral and case studies. There's some video content, some analyst overviews of the company, and profiles for those who want to learn more about us. And then this is a slide that covers the company overview. We were recently named as a top 100 always-on demand company. We're in a really good company with other businesses who've been very successful over the years. Our software has won a number of awards as well as our company, and we're backed by one of the largest and most successful venture capital firms in the market. They're a top 50 firm for sure. I think maybe they're top 25, and Pramod Haq, who is the head of the firm Norwest Venture Partners, NVP, is on our board and is very excited about this whole concept or trend of the IT outsourcing industry evolving and moving to this next level of innovation and evolution. And he sees a number of companies like Appnomic leading the way, bringing a software product to bear and creating the next wave of innovation and economic development coming out of India. So that's a little bit about us, and you can just see us at appnomicsystems.com.
Well, Ray, thank you, and Venki, thank you. And on behalf of the Outsourcing Institute, I'd like to thank everybody for joining our webinar today. I would say that today an educated market participant is going to be a smart market participant, and my encouragement to everybody here, and take the time to spend on this webinar, I tell people no matter how much experience you have, no matter how much you think you know, end a lot of your sentences these days in question marks, not periods, because the market is changing rapidly. You need to be open to the possibility that what you think you know may change. And I encourage you to reach out to firms like Appnomic and Cypress Semiconductor to learn more about their experiences and how they might be able to help you improve your business. So again, on behalf of the Outsourcing Institute, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, David. Thanks to the Outsourcing Institute for inviting us, and thank you, Venki, for joining as well.
Not a problem. Welcome.
Great.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks
Bye,
to
everyone.
our audience.